What if I told you that for an entire century, the pulse of the world was dictated by a single island? An era where steam, steel, and a global navy reshaped human destiny. Welcome to the age of Pax Britannica, the rise of the first true global superpower. After the dust of the Napoleonic Wars settled, the Vienna Peace Conference of 1815 didn't just redraw borders, it created a unipolar world led by Great Britain. The position of the British Empire after 1815 is strikingly similar to two other moments in history: the Roman Republic's emergence as the sole superpower after defeating Carthage in 201 BC, and the United States' dominance following the end of the Cold War in 1991. In fact, historians often call the period between 1815 and 1914 Pax Britannica, a term derived from the famous Pax Romana. It describes a century where British economic, military, and diplomatic might maintained a global system of rapid growth without a total world war. While the term Pax Americana was suggested for the US in 1991, that dream would largely be shelved following the tragic events of September 11, 2001. After the Congress of Vienna, Russia remained the only other major power. However, Russia's massive land force was balanced by the Austrian Empire and Prussia. Britain's arch-rival, France, was kept intact as a great power to maintain the system, but its days of seeking European hegemony were over. The four victors, Britain, Austria, Prussia, and Russia, formed a steel belt of alliances around France. With the Vienna settlement, Europe had finally digested the French threat. The Ottoman Empire, not even invited to the Congress of Vienna, saw its fate sealed during these years. Its decline, which began in the 16th century, accelerated rapidly between 1774 and 1815. Even during the Napoleonic Wars, the Ottomans suffered defeat against a weakened Russia in the 1806 to 1812 war, losing Bessarabia. It is telling that the Ottomans lost this conflict even after the main Russian army had been crushed by Napoleon at Austerlitz in 1805. The situation worsened during the 1828 to 1829 Russo-Ottoman War. Russian forces seized Edirne, the former imperial capital, and pushed deep into eastern Anatolia to Erzurum. For the first time, the empire not only lost territory, but was forced to accept the independence of the Kingdom of Greece in the Peloponnese. To Britain, however, the Ottoman Empire was a crucial buffer state against Russia. The world's only superpower was determined to prevent its ally and rival Russia from becoming a transoceanic military or commercial power. This British strategic protection likely extended the Ottomans' life for 60 years. Only when Britain abandoned this strategy after the 1877 to 1878 war would the end of the empire become inevitable. But it wasn't just geopolitics that made Britain unique. The Industrial Revolution gave her an indisputable edge. Unlike the sudden political revolutions in America, France, or later Russia, the Industrial Revolution was a gradual, heavy transformation. It started with agriculture. Between 1700 and 1850, crop yields tripled. Innovations like Charles Townshend's crop rotation and Jethro Tull's seed drill skyrocketed productivity. This surplus supported a population explosion across Europe, while the steam engine, perfected by Thomas Newcomen, Matthew Boulton, and James Watt, ignited the industrial fire. Humanity had found an alternative to muscle power. By burning coal to create steam, we converted hidden energy into massive mechanical motion. This rotary power transformed the production of paper, yarn, steel, and textiles beyond imagination. Britain's leadership was no accident. It possessed liberal and mature state institutions, strong property laws, and a culture that supported entrepreneurs. Furthermore, Britain's coal and iron were high quality and near the surface, making them cheap to extract. While labor costs were relatively high, this actually incentivized the invention of labor-saving machines. Combined with its status as a mature overseas empire after the 7 Years' War, the revolution accelerated. Colonies in North America, India, and Africa provided raw materials at set prices and served as captive markets for finished British goods. None of these colonies were organized enough to resist as the Americans had. The economic and military gap created by the Industrial Revolution was so vast that for a century the rest of the world could not challenge the West. Had the American Revolution occurred after this industrial maturation, it likely had failed. While the West surged, others crumbled. China, the world's largest economy until the 19th century, faced a catastrophic collapse. However, it's worth noting that unlike India or Egypt, the Ottoman and Chinese empires were never fully colonized by the West. Industrialization also meant urbanization. Before the revolution, 20% of Britons lived in cities. A century later, that number was 80%. This growth came at a human cost. Workdays lasted 16 hours. The agricultural revolution had left people jobless in the fields, forcing them into urban factories where they worked like slaves. Children and women were preferred in textile mills for their small hands, working without any labor laws. Much of 19th century literature captures this tragedy. Coal smoke polluted the air and water. European cities were not planned for such density. Interestingly, much of the ancient Roman knowledge of sanitation had been lost. Prince Albert, the husband of Queen Victoria, died of typhoid caught from the palace's own primitive plumbing. If royalty wasn't safe, imagine the life of a common worker. Despite the misery, Europe's population grew from 140 million in 1750 to 266 million by 1850. Professor David Landis of Harvard captures the power of this era perfectly. In 1870, at its peak, Britain used 100 million tons of coal. The energy from that coal was equivalent to the food calories needed to feed 850 million adult men. Britain's actual population at the time was only 31 million. Its steam power alone equaled the muscle power of 40 million men. This productivity shift broke the global balance. Europe's share of world production jumped from 28% in 1800 to over 61% by 1880. The United States, a late entrant, rose from 0.1% to nearly 15% in the same period, eventually surpassing Britain in GDP by 1871. The true victims were India and China. In 1800, China accounted for 33% of global production. By 1900, it fell to just 6%. India fell from 24% to a mere 2.8%. Modern Chinese leaders still remember these centuries of humiliation and the tragic opium and boxer wars. The revolution also revolutionized transport. Britain moved from muddy, bandit-ridden roads to a 3,600-kilometer canal system, and eventually the railway. By the second phase of the revolution, the empire was connected by telegraphs and steamships. British steel produced superior rifles and eventually Maxim machine guns. The Royal Navy, now powered by steam, used gunboats to penetrate the great rivers of Africa and Asia, cementing colonial rule. As economist William Stanley Jevons put it, "The plains of North America and Russia are our cornfields, Chicago and Odessa are granaries, Canada and the Baltic are our forests, Australia has our sheep farms, and the gold of South America and Australia flows to London." This sounds remarkably like the modern American worldview, but British superiority was soon copied. The United States used its vast territory and immigrant population to leverage new technologies. Cracks began to open in the Vienna system. The Romantic revolutions of 1830 and the widespread 1848 revolutions, a reaction against industrialization, shook the continent. Socialist ideas began to spread among workers. Russia, acting as the policeman of Europe, made a move to deliver the coup de grace to the Ottoman Empire. However, a coalition of Britain, France, and Ottomans humbled Russia in the Crimean War. The Vienna Order was fracturing. Thousands of miles to the west, Americans were entering a war with Mexico over Texas. What happened at the wooden fort of Los Alamos, insignificant compared to Europe's grand fortresses, was the beginning of a chain of events that would propel the United States into the ranks of the great powers. The lion was still roaring, but the eagle was learning to fly. Next time, we look at how the American Civil War and the rise of Germany finally challenged the Pax Britannica. Don't forget to subscribe for more journeys through economic history.